The war began with the invasions of Zanzibar, Jackson, and Menke. Hazak's forces entered the systems through pirate points, deployed their jump ships, and immediately returned to friendly space to prepare for the second wave. On all three planets, Federation's forces rushed to seize the HPG stations, preventing news of the invasions from spreading before the second wave had begun. On Zanzibar, the Pharaoh's Arrow Mercenary Battalion landed directly beside the planetary HPG station in Wete before advancing with the 3rd Federated Suns Lancers to secure the capital. Together, the two forces defeated the local militia within an hour. The Capellan Battletech Lance held out longer, but was forced to surrender after its commander was killed. At the same time, the 2nd Certus Fusiliers Light Combat Team assaulted the coastal city of Gaskill, targeting the Planetary Training Center. Defending the facility were only a single tank company and an infantry battalion. Yet, the cadets fought the last man in a desperate attempt to defend their home. On Jackson, the 8th Certus Fusiliers, the 1st Federated Suns Armored Cavalry, and Holt's Hilltoppers Mercenary Company quickly secured the world's critical locations. However, since the last reconnaissance report, a battalion from the Lethal Injection Mercenary Unit had arrived on the planet for a training exercise. After Federated Suns forces believed that they had secured the world, Lethal Injection emerged from the Perpetual Forest and attacked Hazak's troops. Although outnumbered 3-1, the Capellan mercenaries fought tenaciously before being forced to withdraw. By weaving through the dense forest, they bought enough time to evacuate off-world. Unfortunately, a third of their force was left behind. The surviving mercenaries later reached Victoria, where they warned the Capellan Confederation of Hazak's invasion. Menke was the home of the famed McCarran's Armored Cavalry. It housed both a jungle warfare training facility and a major weapons industry. Capturing the world would not only deprive the Confederation of valuable industrial capacity, but also deal a symbolic blow to the former mercenaries. The 4th Certus Fusiliers and the 6th SETI Hussars Light Combat Team landed on the planet. The Fusiliers moved to seize the HPG station, while the Hussars landed on another continent to assault the Planetary Training Center. Like the cadets on Zanzibar, the defenders resisted with everything they had, but were ultimately forced to retreat into Menke's dense jungles after losing half their strength. After capturing the HPG station, the Fusiliers advanced on a series arms factory. During the operation, the defending 2nd McCarran's Armored Cavalry emerged from the jungle and struck from the rear. The Fusiliers' command company was among the first units destroyed in the ambush, causing the regiment to collapse into a rout that ended only at the capital city of Archibald. By the time they reached the city, they had lost half their strength. The Hussars soon returned to reinforce the battered Fusiliers. However, only a day later, the 3rd McCarran's Armored Cavalry arrived in the system and linked up with the 2nd. Together, the two Big Mac regiments besieged the Fusiliers in Archibald and came close to annihilating them. However, the Hussars managed to break the siege by circling the city and striking the Big Macs from the flank. Although the invasion had already fallen behind schedule, the situation was about to deteriorate further, as a few days later, the 4th Big Mac arrived. Its arrival sealed the fate of the 4th Certus Fusiliers, which were destroyed, while the 6th SETI Hussars scattered into the jungle. The failure to capture Menke and the escape of Lethal Injection completely derailed Amanda Hazak's plans. MIIO intelligence had correctly reported that Menke was defended only by the 2nd Big Mac. What they failed to discover, however, was that the 3rd and 4th Big Mac regiments were returning home after completing their deployments. Their homecoming forced Hazak to divert troops from the second wave to reinforce the ongoing battle on Menke. But the biggest intelligence blunder was the failure to recognize Sun Tzu Lao's new jump ship corps, which he had been building for the past 2 decades. This new transport corps was dedicated entirely to the rapid movement of CCAF forces across the Confederation. Individual jump ships were assigned to specific systems, where incoming dropships could dock and immediately continue their journeys. In times of war, nations often had to press civilian ships into military service. However, doing so disrupted trade and slowed the economy. Governments therefore had to balance how many ships they could commandeer and for how long. Lao's new transportation corps effectively created a permanent command circuit network operating on an army-wide scale. The commander of the transport corps was none other than Sun Tzu's son, Daoshan. Much of Daoshan Lao's childhood was spent away from public eye. He was placed under the care of Sun Tzu's long-missing sister, Kali, while his father focused on combating the Republic. When Daoshan first entered the public eye, what was known about him centered largely on his purported skill as a mech pilot, although outside observers doubted the claim. Apparently, he had graduated at the top of his class at the Xi'an Center for Martial Discipline through pure skill alone. Sun Tzu, however, prevented his son from participating in combat to prove himself, citing security concerns, and effectively kept Daoshan under house arrest. Daoshan did not inherit his father's apparent lack of military skill, but he did inherit Sun Tzu's charisma. He frequently talked his way past the house guards, often promising them rewards after he ascended to the chancellorship. During his many excursions, Daoshan visited frontline commanders and charmed them, gaining their favor. Rather than relying on after-action reports, which were often stripped of important details, particularly regarding mistakes and weaknesses, he sought out commanders directly to learn the truth about combat operations. Through these conversations, Daoshan learned about the logistical problems plaguing the CCAF. When his father created the Transportation Corps, Daoshan undoubtedly convinced Sun Tzu to give him command by presenting a plan to reform the Confederation's logistical network. Knowing it was only a matter of time before the CCAF mounted a full-scale counterattack, Amanda proceeded with the second wave on 12 September. The original plan called for all her forces to converge on Victoria. However, the situation at Menke and the spaceport massacre on Jackson forced her to reconsider. During the massacre, rogue elements of the 8th Certus Fusiliers destroyed a jump ship carrying non-combatants as a distraction while escaping with a large cache of germanium, a critical element in the construction of KF drives. The killing sparked riots among the population of Jackson, tying down the remaining Fusiliers and preventing them from participating in the second wave. On 12 September, the 1st Federated Sons Armored Cavalry, 3rd Federated Sons Lancers, and 2nd Certus Fusiliers entered the Victoria system through a pirate point. They landed on the planet the following day. Lethal Injection was already there to defend the world, but the invaders quickly defeated the battered mercenaries in their first engagement. By then, however, the mercenaries had already raised the alarm, and Capellan reinforcements were on their way. For the next several days, Lethal Injection, Kingston's Rangers, the Planetary Militia, cadets from the local RTC, and even corporate security forces fought the invaders across the frozen planet. The Capellan Strategios were caught by surprise when Lethal Injection's warnings finally reached Xi'an. Daoshan Lao acted swiftly, ordering the Transport Corps to change course toward the embattled worlds. The first reinforcements arrived from Uris and Mitchell on 20th September. However, coinciding with their departure was the arrival of the 3rd Seti Hussars and the 22nd Avalon Hussars in those same systems. Both worlds were swiftly captured with barely a shot fired. The reinforcements arrived only to be immediately hounded by the enemy. The Uris Home Guard lost 75% of its forces before even setting foot on the planet. Sung's Rangers absorbed the survivors and took up positions in the hills outside the capital city of Barnes, where they held out for several weeks. It took more than a month for the 5th Big Mac to reach Victoria and link up the remaining defenders. Sangshao Garvey Whitlock, assumed overall command and began preparing an assault to retake the earthworks factory in the O'Hanlon habitation dome. He ordered Soong's Rangers and Kingston's Rangers to attack the 3rd Federated Sons Lancers, preventing them from reinforcing the defense of the habitation dome. However, the Rangers mistimed their attack. Soong's Rangers arrived too late to flank the Lancers, and by then, Kingston's forces had already been forced back. When Soong's Rangers finally arrived, they found an alerted enemy waiting for them. The Rangers lost half their forces in the ensuing battle. Although the Capellan forces were defeated, the 3rd Lancers vacated the capital the following day to reinforce the 2nd Fusiliers. Whitlock then began his assault on the O'Hanlon Dome, pushing the 1st Cavalry all the way back to the factory's perimeter. However, 1st Cavalry hover tanks managed to flank the attacking Capellans, destroying the security forces and lethal injection entirely. Worse still, the 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Certus Fusiliers arrived and enveloped the Capellan forces. Whitlock sounded the retreat, but before his troops withdrew, they had inflicted massive casualties on the invaders and leveled the earthworks factory. Later in November, Warrior House Kamata arrived to replace the outgoing 5th Big Mac, who headed towards Menke. The situation remained the same until 15th November, when the Certus Avengers and 3rd Set Hussars arrived and kept the Warrior House from regrouping with the remaining Rangers. The Hazak successfully drove the Capellans from the hills, but refrained from pursuing them deeper into the winter wasteland. Returning to Menke, the 7 Crucius Lancers were redirected from Zhengkou to assist the trapped Federated Sons troops. However, when they arrived, they drew the attention of all 3 Big Mac regiments. The Big Macs had been hunting the remaining Seti Hussars through the forests when the 7th arrived. Seeing the newly arrived Lancers as the easier target, all 3 regiments converged on them. The 7th was quickly forced off-world with heavy casualties. Almost immediately afterward, the 4th Federated Sons Lancers arrived and suffered the same fate, although they managed to remain on the planet and retreat into the dense jungles. On 8th October, another diverted Hazak formation, the Davion Assault Guards, made planetfall. The Assault Guards successfully established a foothold in the capital city and pushed the Big Macs back. By this point, the Seti Hussars had been hiding for almost a month and sensed that it was time to emerge from the forests. However, just as they did so, the Big Macs launched a counteroffensive that drove the Assault Guards out of Archibald, leaving the Hussars completely isolated. The 2nd Big Mac annihilated the regiment shortly afterward. Following this, the 3rd and 4th Big Mac hunted the 4th Lancers. The Assault Guards' commander ordered the units to withdraw, and on 12 October, they left the world when the 5th Certus Fusiliers arrived to relieve them. For the next few weeks, the fighting remained short and relatively low intensity as Hazak's forces avoided directly engaging the Big Macs. That changed on 31st October, when both sides committed to a 4-day battle later known as the All Hallows Slaughter. Hazak's forces clashed with the 2nd and 3rd Big Mac, and by the end of the fighting, both sides had lost all of their non-mech forces. In November, despite having only half the strength they possessed when they left Victoria, the 5th Big Mac arrived and dropped directly on top of the 2 Hazak regiments in the jungles outside Archibald. The sudden attack nearly broke the invaders, but they managed to withdraw in good order. The Hazak forces then split into 2 groups, drawing the Big Macs far away from the city. By 15 November, the 2 Hazak regiments had isolated the 4th Big Mac and nearly destroyed it. Fortunately for the defenders, the rest of the Big Macs arrived in time to save their comrades. With little choice remaining, Hazak's forces retreated off-world, conceding defeat on Menke.